Happy 2023, everyone. I hope everyone rung in the new year safely and soundly with family, friends, loved ones, pets, um, extraterrestrial ETs, whoever you rung in the new year with. I hope you rung it in well. I rung it in at work, because typically I always work on New Year's. Last year I didn't work, but I knew I wasn't going to do anything this year, so I just worked. I don't usually go home to Louisiana for holidays or to Texas to visit my sister because flights are super expensive during the holidays. But yeah, I run 2023 in at work, which was fine with me. So, and thanks to the new people who subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. I thought I would kick 2023 off with revisiting one of my old cases I talked about, and I'm pretty sure I've already told you guys this, that I was going to revisit it, and it's the Roswell crash in 1947. I just wanted to go over some details about the crash that I was unsure about, being were there two crash sites, how many bodies, stuff like that. So I was doing some research. I went to this like mom and pop bookstore. I'm pretty sure I talked about it on my last video, and I found a book by Kevin Randall, History of UFO Crashes. And then I was watching Linda, something on my lip. Linda Moan Howe, one of her videos that she usually does on Wednesday, and she was talking about crashes that happened in New Mexico. This was a rebroadcast of her show, and I watched it the other day. And then I watched a couple of documentaries on Tubi that talked about Roswell. 75, it was called Roswell 75 years ago or something like that, but I believe it came out, I think it came out this year, it came out last year, 2022. And yeah, I just thought I would revisit this case because pretty much the military outed themselves in there. Then they tried to backtrack. They came out and said that the Army Air Force captured a flying saucer, and then a few hours later they turned around and said it was a freaking weather balloon. Yeah, but they pretty much outed themselves. I think that's why a lot of people go back to the Roswell case to revisit it, because from all the evidence, from all the witnesses, it happened. Even though the Air Force wants to come out and say it was Project Mogul, which they did, I believe, in 1997, they came out and announced, it was a top secret project called Project Mogul, and that's what happened. And the bodies you saw were test dummies. People saw were test dummies. Test dummies didn't come out to 1949, and the Roswell crash in 1997. So, but most of the people who are familiar with the Roswell crash and done their research know that it wasn't a weather balloon. And maybe it was. They were doing a top secret project, but Project Mogul. But that's not what it was in 1947. No way. I don't believe it. I don't buy it. So, and like I said, I was doing my research about about Roswell, and the thing that I was unsure about was the crash, because there's been stories out there that there were two crash sites, one crash site. It was just never a direct. I was just unsure about how many crash sites there were. So from my research that I did, and from the books I read, I think there was one major crash site. We know that Mac Brazel came out and found debris on his ranch that was scattered for like miles, but there was no gouge like something had crashed on his ranch. There was just debris littered everywhere. But supposedly the Army Air Force had been tracking this object, this UFO, on radar for a while now. I don't know if it was a couple of hours. Where is it? Do I have it written down? Well, anyway, during 1947, during that first week of July, the Army Air Force supposedly was tracking this object on radar. They knew it went down somewhere, and once it went down and crashed, they had their team or whatever out there at the site, and to recover the actual craft, which wasn't completely, obviously was damaged, because they say the bodies were outside the craft or whatever. Now, this wasn't the crash that happened on Mac Brazel's ranch. So what I think happened, and what researchers are unsure about, because they weren't really sure, from the book from Kevin Randall, I watched a documentary last night about him. He was talking about it. From what researchers are not sure about, it was how the the debris from that crash ended up on Mac Brazel's ranch. I mean, it's possible. I guess lightning could have struck it, and part of the ship started to break up. And I think the debris may have fallen off the ship onto his ranch. And then some people said that the ship, well, from the documentary I watched last night, what Kevin Randall was talking about, that maybe the craft had an ejection pod, like, and with inside it, like the ETs ejected, and then the craft disintegrated over as it was coming in over Mac Brazel's ranch, which would make sense how the debris ended up on his ranch, but there was no gouge there, showing that the ship had crashed there. So supposedly the craft ended up, I think they say like 50 miles. I have it written down, 50 miles away. I know I have it highlighted. Let me see if it's in my book. Maybe I didn't highlight it. Anyway, where the actual craft landed, it was some 50 miles away from where the debris was found on Mac Brazel Ranch. So yeah, that cleared that up for me, because I was really unsure. I'm like, if there had been a crash on his ranch, he would have definitely seen like a huge gouge in the ranch. He would have seen the craft there. So obviously part of the debris broke off from the craft, and as the ship was coming in and fell on his ranch, and then the ship crashed, landed somewhere else where the Air Force were monitoring it, and that's where the main part of the ship was. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was clear up was the bodies. Some people say there were 3 bodies. Some people say there were 4 bodies. I always heard 3 and 4, but recently I come to find out Linda Moon Howe was talking about there were 5 bodies. And according to the book that I have, there were supposed to be 5 bodies. And I'm going to read a little bit of this to you. So this was according to William Woody, who lived east of Roswell in July 1947, was outside the house with his father looking toward northwest. Late on the evening of July 4th, Woody saw a brilliant object plunge to the ground. Woody said it was a bright white light with red streaks in it. According to him, it took a long time to fall, longer than the meteors he'd seen in the past. There was no shape behind the light and no noise associated with it. A day or two later, Woody and his father attempted to find the area where the object had hit the ground. They drove north from Roswell along Highway 285, but each time they tried to use a side road to the west, they were stopped by military cordon. According to Woody, all the access roads had been blocked. Okay, first of all, let's stop right there. If this was just a plain old weather balloon, which had been dropped multiple times on that area, because ranchers had been finding weather balloons just landing on their property, according to this book, Trinity by Jacques Pillay. So people in that area knew what weather balloons looked like. Jesse Marcel knew what a weather balloon looked like, even though the Air Force threw him under the bus. So yeah, why have all that military presence out there if it was just a freaking weather balloon? Come on, why block off roads if it was just a weather balloon? Okay, so back to the story. At first light on the morning of July 5th, military officers had found the site of the crash. They were cordoned the area, keeping away all civilians and unauthorized personnel. During the day of July the 5th, they recovered the bodies of 5 victims of the crash, loaded the remains of the crashed ship onto flatbed trucks, and took it into the Roswell base. And by dusk, they had recovered almost everything. The next day, they brought experts in camouflage to the area. They wanted to eliminate visible traces of the crash and the recovery operation in the area. Now, as this was going on, the military didn't know that there was debris on Mac Brazel's ranch. That would follow later once he contacted the sheriff. Once he went out there and surveyed his land to check on his animals, he found the debris, contacted the sheriff. No, he found the debris, took it to one of his neighbors to show them, and they said, you probably should contact the sheriff because this could be something from a top secret military aircraft that may have went down. So then he went into town, to Roswell, showed the sheriff. The sheriff contacted the military, and that's when they sent Jesse Marcel out, and I forgot the other guy that came with him. They collected some of the debris, I believe, took it back to the base, and then that's when everybody else came back out to the base, and then all hell broke loose from there. After that, they pretty much arrested Mac Ross. They didn't say they arrested him, but they took him into the military base, and they kept him there for over a week, because he had already told people that he had seen this strange debris on his property, and it was unlike anything he had seen before. But yeah, they interrogated him for over a week until he changed his story. So let me go back to this. And why do all that? If it's just a weather balloon, why are you gonna hold somebody against their will for like a week? Okay. Let's see. So the next day, okay, I'm going to read a little bit more. So where did I end? I ended where they want to eliminate visible traces of the crash and the recovery operation in the area. During the afternoon of July the 5th, Glenn Dennis, a mortician working at the Ballard Funeral Home in Roswell, received the first of a series of strange phone calls from the base. The National Mortuary Officer called to ask him about the size and type of caskets available and if they could be hermetically sealed. Dennis responded that he had a 4-foot casket but could get a smaller one from Amarillo. The mortuary officer, I'll get back to you, and Dennis thought nothing more of it. 30 or 40 minutes later, the officer called back with questions about the preparation of dead bodies. Dennis said he was asking me about our preparations, preparing a body that had been laying out in the elements or decomposing, how we treated burnt bodies or very traumatic cases. Dennis said the officer wanted to know what they could do to preserve the body that wouldn't change any of the chemical context, destroy the blood, or destroy anything that might be important down the road. According to Dennis, he wanted to know what the various processes were about the chemicals used and if any of them could change the chemical components of the tissues or the composition of the blood. I said that they would, and I knew at the time that something had happened, something they probably weren't ready to release. It might be some VIP or something. I told them at the time I could come out and help, but the mortuary officer said that it was fine, that it was for future reference. There is something we need to know for future reference. The mortuary officer hung up, and Dennis went on to other things. One of them was driving. Okay, so we're going to end it right there. So yeah, if it's just a weather balloon, why are you calling about caskets and preserving the bodies, and if the caskets can be hermetically sealed and blah blah blah? But supposedly it's just a weather balloon. That's what they threatened witnesses with, people who witnessed stuff. There was I was watching a documentary again the other night, the same documentary, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. Her name is Frankie Rowe. At the time, she was 12 years old when the crash happened in 1947, and her father worked for the local fire department, where her father and other firemen were on the scene of the crash where the bodies were before the military got there, and they saw these beings laying out there. And according to her, she said 2 of the bodies were outside the craft dead. One of the aliens were still alive, walking around, and her father said that they were just shocked with what they were seeing. They just couldn't believe it, and he felt such sadness from this being that, I don't know, it was just such sadness that he couldn't, and there was nothing that they could do to help this being, and they just felt sadness from it and fear. I mean, who can blame them? You crash on this alien planet. You see how our history was. We had just gone through World War II and just our overall history. You crash on our planet. I would have been terrified too. I would have been terrified too, to be in the hands of our military. Just, oh no. But anyway, she said that her father was there. They saw the craft, they saw the bodies. Then the military showed up and made them leave the property, of course. But she said a couple of days later that some military officers showed up at their house. Again, she's 12 years old. Oh, oh no, 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 no. Let me go back. So she, I can't remember if it was the next day or a couple of days later. She had to go into town to have a doctor's visit. So her father took her into town with him, and afterwards she stayed at the firehouse with her father. Well, the sheriff showed up at the fire department, and he had like some of this debris from the crash in his pocket. And he told everybody to come inside. I want to show you this. So he pulled out this debris. It looked like tinfoil at the time, but it looked like tinfoil, but it wouldn't fold. You know how tinfoil crumples up. This will fold up and just fold. You could crumple it up, but it folds back out perfectly, perfectly, perfectly straight. And I almost feel like you didn't have anything in your hand, she said. And she said they played with it for a while or whatever. And and so after they finished playing with it, everybody went back to doing what they were doing, and her father left and went home. And I think it was the next day or a couple of days later that some military officers showed up at her house, and her father wasn't there, but her and her mom was, and her sisters or whatever her were outside playing in the background. And these officers showed up and asked who was the girl, which one of your daughters were at the firehouse the other day. And her mom was like, it was Frankie. And so he came into the house, and they were gonna sit on the couch. He told them, don't sit on the couch, let's go into the dining room. And he stood up and made them sit down. And this is when she started to threaten her. They're threatening a 12-year-old girl, telling her you didn't see what you thought you saw. And she didn't know what was going on at the time. She like, well, I did see it. I was there. And like, no, you didn't see what you thought you saw. And she said he had this baton in his hand. And every time she would say, well, she did see it. And he was like, no, you didn't. He would hit the baton in his hand, trying to intimidate them or whatever. So that went on for a while. She said he was in the house for like 45 minutes, almost an hour, till he convinced her to go along with it. And okay, oh no, there was more to the story. He said, well, if you continue to say you saw what you saw, there are places we would separate you and your family. Your sisters would go to one place. Concentration camps, basically. During the time World War II, they had the Japanese in the concentration camps and stuff, and then they had the POWs of from Germany there, and they threatened his family, saying that we'll separate you. Some of you are going to go to the Japanese concentration camp, some of you are going to go to the POW camps, and if that doesn't work, then we'll just make you disappear completely. He's like, this is a big desert. We can take your bodies out there. No one would ever find you. This was the military. Our military threatening our U.S. citizens. It's just absolutely insane. Not to mention a 12-year-old child. And when you listen to her tell a story, you can see the truth behind her, the sadness. The tears just well up in her eyes, and just, she said even now it's so hard to think about, even though it's been 75 some years. I'm not sure if she's still alive, but yeah, but you guys have to watch the documentary. And so again, are you gonna tell me this is a weather balloon? And it wasn't just her that they threatened. They threatened a lot. They threatened the sheriff who had some of the debris. The sheriff was the guy who called the Army Air Force because Matt Grousel came to him. He called them out to the base. Out to the ranch. And then they turned around and threatened him and his family, telling him they would separate them and take his kids away if he didn't keep his mouth shut. This is a sheriff who called them out there. He didn't have to, but he did. And then they turned around and threatened him. So yeah. And that's what they did. But supposedly this was just a weather balloon. So but you're threatening people over this? Absolutely insane. So do I think the Roswell crash happened? Yes, I do. I absolutely think it happened. I absolutely think they found bodies. I think the bodies went to Wright-Patterson. I'm still kind of really unsure on how many bodies. Because like I said, the book talks about 5. Linda Mulholland talked about 5. But then Frankie Rose said that her father saw 2 beings outside the craft. 2 beings outside the craft. on the ground dead, and then one walking around. Um, so I'm still in, I don't know about how many bodies, but I do want to know where the bodies were taken to. I mean, well, I know they were taken to Wright-Patterson, but are they still there to this day? I would, I mean, I guess it's possible, but I think if you want to like really study them or test them, maybe some of them went to Dugway Proving Ground. And I say, the reason I say that because the military is always thinking about war and defending the United States. So it would make sense if they want to weaponize it. Let's say this alien was carrying a virus or something, and they want to weaponize whatever it's carrying. And Dugway Proving Ground is a biological and chemical weapon lab. So it's possible they could have sent one of the bodies there. They wanted to study it. I mean, it's a heavily secured military installation, so it would make sense. But are all the bodies still there? I don't know. And were there 3, 4, or 5? That's the other thing I'm still unsure about. I don't know. It's going on 76 years, and we still get the same lies from our military that the Roswell crash never happened, which we know it did. They threatened, there was too many witnesses, they threatened too many people for it to be anything else. There's just too much evidence that points to saying otherwise. It was not a freaking weather balloon. It was not Project Mogul. It was what they said it was when that story broke in the newspaper. That was the other thing I was unsure about, was who broke the story, but I found out who that was. So it was Walter Hart. He was public information officer of the 509th Bomb Group. He was told to issue the press release by Colonel Blanchard, his commanding officer. So that's who it came from. It didn't come from a civilian. It came from somebody in the Army Air Force. It came from Colonel Blanchard, who told Walter Hart, the public information office, to release the information to the public that the Army Air Force has captured a flying saucer. So yeah, that cleared that up, because I always wondered who released that information. But then a couple hours later, the story changed and said it was a a weather balloon. I think Colonel Blanchard had screwed up, and maybe his superiors didn't realize he did what he did, and then I'm pretty sure his ass was in hot water after he made that press release, or had his public relation officer make that announcement to the public. Oh, can you imagine how he probably got like chewed out? And I think after that he got like relocated, because reporters and stuff tried to locate them and they couldn't find him. They couldn't find like Jesse Marcel either. I think they all got like relocated. So why are you going to relocate them again over a weather balloon? I don't know. But yeah, that's what it was. That was a little bit of more information cleared up for me about the Roswell incident, which I was unsure of. I'm still unsure about the bodies. If anybody has a clear idea how many bodies it was, let me know. I would just like to be clear on that, I guess. So yeah, 3, 4, or 5. Oh my God, another other thing I'm thinking about. I've been in Florida for a few years now, because I'm originally from Louisiana. I don't want to move back to Louisiana. So I'm thinking at the end of 2023, I want to move over to the West Coast, not California, because California is too freaking expensive. I can't afford that. I narrowed it down between New Mexico, Arizona, and Las Vegas. I've been to New Mexico. No, I've been to, not New Mexico. I've been to Arizona. I've been to Las Vegas. I really loved Arizona, the Scottsdale area. So I'm thinking about moving towards that way. If you guys have any suggestions, because I'm going to have to go out there and find a job, and I don't know, and then find some place to stay. So if you guys have any ideas, what will work best? I think because right now I work in hospitality. And I'm pretty sure I could probably go out there and find a job in hospitality, especially in Las Vegas, in the hotels. But I don't know if I want to move to Las Vegas. But then I want to do something completely different, like work in one of the cannabis dispensaries, but not so far as like the dispensary itself where they sell it, but the more side where they grow it. Because I've been taking cannabis classes, and I would like to work in the greenhouse area of growing it. So I don't know if you guys have some suggestions, ideas, people I can talk to, where I should start, what state you think I should move to. Give me some ideas because I have to the end of this year to decide on where I want to go next. So yeah, again, that's it. That's some of my thoughts on Roswell Revisited 2023. Ooh. Let me know your thoughts on Roswell and how many bodies and where do you think the bodies are now and all that good stuff. So yeah, that's it. I'm out. Bye for now.